What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Corey Austin Theorem. Just wanted to drop a video. I haven't spoken to you guys in a few days. If you're just happening upon my channel, I'm just a guy who talks about substance use, substance abuse, particularly with kratom and then also 7-hydroxy. First discovered kratom back in, I think it was 2019. I always kind of get it confused whether it was 18 or 19. I think it was 2019 that I discovered it. And, ever since then, I've stopped taking kratom, gone back to taking kratom, graduated to the MIT 45 extracts, stopped taking those, went back to taking them, quit everything altogether for a good 8 or 9 months, ended up going back and trying the 7-hydroxy. That was one that sent me straight to the detox facility. That's the one that did me in. Now, it doesn't have to be that way for everybody. With that said, that's what I do on this channel. That's kind of what I talk about, and I vlog my personal experiences with these substances and having come off of them and all of that. So if you appreciate someone's just candid, honest experience with something like this, do subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment. If you want to give like a thanks and say, here's a couple of bones for you, I appreciate what you do, that's fine too. I'll take it. But that's not why I do it, for the money, for sure. I'm not making bank off of this, but I do like to help people, and I do spend my time on it, so it is what it is. But so yeah, I'm something like right around 90 days off of the 7-hydroxy at this point. I think it's actually a little more than that, maybe 91, 92. I stopped counting a while back. I do know yesterday was officially 3 months that I've been officially off. But you have certain months where there's more than 30 days. October, by example, had 31 days. So with that, I think I'm more somewhere around 91 or 92, but I'm somewhere around the 90-day mark off the 7-hydroxy. I will say at this point, everything is back to as normal as it will be for me. I'm sure my mental space will probably change quite a bit and hopefully improve quite a bit, over the next several months. Physically, definitely back to normal physically. My sleep's still pretty good. That's always a little weird for me, because I still will kind of wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know if that's just kind of me, like baseline me, or maybe I'm not quite there yet, as far as the whole sleep portion of all of this, but I feel fine, and when I wake up, I don't wake up like, oh, I'm in agony or I'm having some sort of withdrawal. It's nothing like that. It's just, I'm just awake, and then my brain's kind of awake. And there are times where I'll wake up once, maybe twice throughout the night, and I'm not uncomfortable at all. I'm just awake. And I have difficulty going back to sleep sometimes for maybe 30 minutes or so. But, it could be that I go to bed kind of early, probably for a man my age. Some of you know, some of you don't. I have a 2-year-old at home, which is just wild. I was 47 years old when he was born. Obviously, this was a surprise to myself and my wife. But because of him and his schedule being so young, he goes to bed at 8:30 every night, and my wife and I, we both have to get up early, both have to work. So we don't stay up after he goes to bed and just hang out and party and all that. We kind of just end up going to bed around the same time he does, because he has kind of a bedtime routine where one of us, usually my wife, is in there with him when he goes to sleep, and then she'll exit, once he goes to sleep. But so we just kind of, and then I'm retired to my bedroom and maybe watching TV or something for a minute, and next thing you know, I'm sleepy once I lay in the bed. So sometimes I'm asleep by 9:30, and So the fact that I'll wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 in the morning, it could just be I don't need that much sleep, to be honest with you. It's kind of hard to tell at this point, and I think some of that and what my actual baseline is as far as my sleep patterns will come back more into focus as the months progress. I do believe that that's true, but physically definitely back to normal at this point. Trying to get back more into exercising. I still have not been able to push myself to get up and exercise in the morning. I know that's the best thing to do, and it's in the pit of my stomach all the time. I should be getting up an hour early and just going ahead and exercising, getting it over with. That way when I get off of work in the afternoon, I don't have to go home and do it. And because I don't want to have to go home, I don't get home till about 5:30 every day, so I've already been away from my family all evening. I don't want, if I exercise, right after exercising and sweating, the first thing I want to do is shower, because I don't want to be disgusting for around my family. So if I do a hard 30-minute exercise, then I got 15-20 minutes of showering, I've wasted an additional hour after I get home doing my exercise routine. And I'm kind of mad at myself, if I'm being honest with you. Like, dude, just set your alarm, get up early, but because my sleep's been a little bit wonky, and I'm sometimes up for a little while throughout the night, I always end up falling back to sleep, by around 3-4 o'clock, and then I'm just in such a relaxed, I'm not a morning person. I don't think I am even at baseline. I don't think I can remember being a teenager, which I know teenagers, their circadian rhythm is a little bit different, but I can remember being a teenager before I was ever on any sort of drugs, and just not being a morning person. Just not a morning person. It takes me a little while, to really get woken up. Maybe that'll change in the next, 6 months or so. We'll see. I'll let you guys know. But somebody asked me the other day, what's the hardest thing about being off of the 7-hydroxy and kind of, starting your life anew? And I will say the hardest thing is the mental aspect of it. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people, one of the reasons they began using substances in the first place is to kind of numb over some pain that you had maybe from childhood, from your teenage years, or even adulthood for some of us. You can call it child trauma, teenage trauma, adult trauma. There's all kinds of different traumas. Many of us have some sort of childhood trauma, and I say many of us, and because I include myself in that. I do have some childhood trauma, not as a result of my family. I come from a good family, but just elsewhere, and I won't go into it. And it's not like horrible. I don't want to paint myself as some sort of victim, because there's people that have way worse, childhood trauma than I did. But it also depends on that child and how that child handles and copes with it. And children already, for the most part, although they are resilient, most children do a pretty poor job of handling trauma, right? You're a child. You don't know how to handle trauma. A lot of children just bundle it up, assume that they were in the wrong or they were bad, even though they might actually be victims. And then that autonomic nervous system kicks on in them, and they just spend the rest of their teenage and adult lives in a literal fight or flight sort of state, where they honestly just live their whole life nervous and anxious. And what this is unresolved, unworked through childhood trauma that may have happened to them that they've never dealt with in an appropriate way, in a proper way. And so that leads me to it. I think that's one of the hardest parts, because as many of you know, I didn't choose to do like AA or NA or anything like that. Now, I did do that, and I did it daily and religiously for about the first, I'd say, 40 days 45 days. And I just stopped attending at that point because, I'm not planning on going the rest of my life completely abstinent from all mind-altering substances. I do want to have a drink. If I want to have a drink, I want to be able to do that. I will take like some THC gummies or something like that from time to time. More so on the weekend, if my wife and I are hanging out, the baby goes to bed, we'll stay up having some drinks, doing like a crab boil. This is hot tub weather right here, late fall, early winter. We kind of start getting into that hot tub phase, so we want to have some mixed drinks and might be a little THC involved, that sort of thing. But it's light. I don't do a whole lot of it, and during the week I don't really drink at all. Maybe every once in a while I have a couple of drinks during the week, but it'll be like some Cabernet Sauvignon, something simple. But back to my AANA, once I stopped attending those virtually because I wanted to still be able to use substances. I wasn't about to go to AA and NA and still be using substances because they have a very harsh stance on this, and they recommend that you get a sponsor. Somebody's going to help hold you accountable. You don't ever have to use again. You don't ever have to pick up again. They're really, really big on that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. For most people who are heavy users, I would say is probably a good thing. And who's to say that if I would have done that and went that route and not chose to come back and attempt to control my substance use again, maybe I will be a happier person overall. That could be true. But it's just not a path I'm willing to take. And for me personally, as long as I don't get twisted out on and physically dependent upon some sort of substance, I'm golden, man. I'm good with that. I can control the rest of it. Certain things I can't fuck with, and I know that, and I accept that. Outside of that, I'm gonna have a few drinks every once in a while if I want, socially. And if I want to take a little THC in the form of some gummies or something, I can do that. Outside of that, I'm an extremely healthy person. What I was saying earlier about the exercise, I've only been doing 2, maybe 3 days a week of exercise, but it's because I can't get my lazy ass up in the morning out of bed to do the exercise before work. I'm gonna start doing that eventually. I'm telling you, I'm gonna start doing that eventually. But I'll let you guys know when I do. But yeah, I think the hardest part is not really doing the serious cognitive behavioral therapy of kind of dealing with any childhood, traumas that you may have dealt with. For me, like as a young preteen, I had some bullying. That I got bullied by kids that were older than me when I was in 7th grade. I had a group of 8th grade boys who began to pick on me and stuff like that. And as I consider myself a badass now, trained in multiple martial arts, stay in shape, I'm still trained and that sort of stuff. So it's more so, for me, it's more so something where at 12 years old, you're a child. You're helpless, and especially when you're being picked on by multiple people. I couldn't defend myself against these older kids. So, and the reason they picked on me is because I was popular. The little girl, their little 8th grade girl friends liked me, right? And they were jealous of me, so that's why I was picked on. So I had a little bit of childhood trauma, but then I also had that kind of trauma, which I guess would still be considered childhood trauma because I was only 12. It was more like preteen trauma. But that stuff, I've not dealt with that stuff. And I think that's probably the hardest part, because it's that stuff that I experienced, as a child, that and I've worked my way through some of it, just understanding that and accepting the fact that children just do stupid things. And I don't blame the people who bullied me, they were just being young, immature, stupid children as well. And eventually, as we got older, they did stop picking on me. And I actually, became friends with a couple of them. But, stuff like this really affected me. And it's stuff like that I think caused me to start using, because I carried that with me through my teen years, of course. Okay. And it was one of those things where I carried that stuff with me, and it caused me to use to numb that pain, right? But I was doing this as a young adult. I had not identified that what I was doing is carrying around, some childhood and preteen trauma that I had experienced. Not to mention that I was exposed to my first pornographic magazine when I was like 5 years old. Well, maybe not 5. I was probably more like 6 or 7. That may be a little bit sensationalized to say 5. But I was young. I was under 8 years old, for sure, when I saw my first pornographic magazine. Back then, there wasn't this wealth of online porn that you see now, because there wasn't even an online. There wasn't even a World Wide Web at this time. You're talking 1982, 1983, somewhere around in there. So the best you could do at that time was just Playboy magazines. Nonetheless, still saw those for the first time before I was 8 years old. So you can imagine that triggered something in me about the whole sexual curiosity. And then later, once the substance use and abuse started, I was already on the wrong track sexually. I lost my virginity at a young age, younger than I should have, younger than I would ever be comfortable with my own son losing his virginity. If my own son had lost his virginity at the age that I lost my virginity, I would be very worried and would want to sit down and have a talk with him about it. And get him to try to work through that, because that's something that a child at that age should not be experiencing. I wasn't under 10, by the way. It was older than that, but I was way too young. I was too young to be. I was 13 years old. Let me just put it that way. And see, now at that time, everybody was talking about it. Everybody's hormones were going crazy. So it was one of those things where most people hadn't really done it yet, but everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about it. So I thought I was cool, having already lost my virginity. Now, as a grown-ass man, looking back on it and realizing how young 13-year-old kids are. If I see a 13-year-old out on the street, it just blows my mind to think that I was that age when I lost my virginity. That's fucking crazy. They're infants. They're still kids, When I look at myself now and kids that age, and it's like, it should have never happened that young. But it's that type of stuff that cognitively I'm having to try to kind of work through on my own now as an adult. And to be honest, it's going pretty well. A lot of it's just my faith, my spirituality, realizing that I'm forgiven for anything that I've ever done to anyone. And I've also apologized at the time of the offense to a lot of the people that I wronged, right, during my drug use and all that stuff. So, for me, I would say that's the hardest part. Physically, I'm kind of back, but working on my spirituality, working on the cognitive, self-talk, behavioral therapy sort of things, and just working on that. But that's the hardest part, is working through all that mess, all the childhood trauma, the preteen trauma, any working through anyone that ever wronged you. And as a person who was addicted to substances, working through your own shit where you wronged other people. All of that stuff that's what's the hardest, because if you don't deal with those things, that's what drives you back to the substances, right? So I have to be very, very vigilant and very careful with that to stay on top of my mental and emotional and spiritual game, right? I love you guys. I gotta go. I will do a video. I'm going to Bryson City, the Western North Carolina mountains, on a little vacay this weekend. When I do that, I always take a nice video of a cabin that we stay in. Just put together a little, video of our vacation. Try and encourage anyone, if you're anywhere close enough, anywhere near the south, get your ass to the Western North Carolina mountains. It's a really, really beautiful place to vacation, and my wife and I always get really nice cabins when we go there, so I always do like a little video tour of the cabin and then things to do in the city and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. I'll be leaving out Friday. We'll be gone for 3 or 4 days, and yeah, looking forward to dropping that video for you guys. Love you guys very much. I will see you on the next one. Oh yeah, also please do subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below. I will see you on the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Peace.